Hello everybody, thanks to the popularity of my previous video, we've reached 1000 subscribers. Wow. So, hello to all my new subscribers. I want to thank all of you for being here, and I promise I will make fun, interesting content on fascinating topics for all of you, all the time. For example, today's video is on common institutions that are actually showcasing the abject and continued failures of society. Goodbye, new subscribers. Thank you for stopping by. Let's get started. As humans, we have a nasty psychological tendency. When something happens often enough for a long enough time, we tend to think of it as normal or even good, even if it's actually a sign of something terrible. There are many such systemic problems in the world, but let's start with something light for today's video. For example, have you ever thought about how messed up it is that we have private health insurance? I'm sure I don't have to explain insurance to you, my smart, beautiful and handsome audience, but I will, because I'm farming for that sweet YouTube watch hours. Like and subscribe. The idea of insurance is that while you are able to, you pay into a pool of money alongside other able-bodied people, so that one day, on the off chance you or anyone in the pool experience something that lowers your financial capabilities to live life, you will be able to draw from that collective money. The idea is that most people have more good days than bad, and that during those good days we give a little bit so the small amount of people having bad days can draw a lot. Eventually, it will be our turn to have bad days, and we can be covered by sharing. There's nothing inherently wrong with that idea. It's basically how public healthcare works as well, but I'm here to talk about specifically private health insurance, especially those in developed countries. The fact that they exist to such an extent should be considered a detrimental defeat of the society they exist in. According to a summary by the CAS, most private insurance are for countries with weaker public healthcare, which enrolls up to 74% of their population, with insurance used to mainly cover for co-payments and drugs, basically the medicine side of medicine. But more interestingly, in countries with robust public healthcare, less than 10% of the population uses private insurance to mostly circumvent wait time and increase quality of services. In essence, the luxury part of medicine. What this shows is that there is nothing that private insurance does in the necessary segments of healthcare, at least, that public healthcare can't do. And that private insurance and healthcare only works when public healthcare isn't well funded or available. And even then, private insurance negatively affect healthcare across the board. The countries with higher private insurance also generally shows higher costs for treatments, because of course it does. The entire point of insurance is for the richer people to pay for the poorer people, so that collectively they can reduce costs by bulk buying services at a constant rate. The same way public healthcare works, so that when poorer people get wealthier, they can then pay for the people who are poor at that time. It's a life cycle for money. But that's only if there's a societal agreement to do that, especially for those that are richer. A kind of system that, regardless of who you are, have to participate in to give money, regardless of personal status or decisions, like a law or a collective money-taking services, taxes. Because let's be honest, without laws or an angry mob threatening to eat them, rich people aren't going to just hand over their wealth. How do you think they got so rich in the first place? Rich people tend to pay for the private health insurance that's for rich people. They have higher premiums because rich people tend to live longer lives because they're rich, so insurance takes less risk. So they get higher returns. These are rates the filthy poor don't have access to, but it also means that without access to the larger pool of wealth provided by those with money, the insurance pool of the general public gets smaller, increasing the financial burden for everyone else. As covered in one of my earliest videos, money is only valued when transactions are made. Large amount of money held in an insurance pool not used by wealthy people who do not need as much healthcare and are able to afford healthcare even without the pool are not actively undergoing transactions. This lowers everyone's spending power and increases healthcare costs across the board. Everything that private insurance offers, like choice and luxury services, aren't vital to the process of healthcare, and the things they are supposed to fix, like shorter wait times and actually that's pretty much about it, are all things that can be fixed by properly funding public healthcare systems, and most of the time for far lower costs and for far better results. What all this shows is that a country that has a large private health insurance industry, like, I don't know, just name a random country, Singapore, shouldn't be taken as a successful healthcare system. Maybe private investment firms and for-profit insurance have a little bit of bias and aren't the most trustworthy when it comes to advocating for less private insurance. And maybe we shouldn't keep pretending Singapore's healthcare system is some sort of miracle compromise between capitalism and public service, as I keep seeing in the fucking news, when it's actually a patchwork of underpaid and overworked nurses and doctors barely holding things together under the last remnants of a socialist system whose taxes for the wealthy isn't keeping up with the wealth gap, while private insurance gouge the most vulnerable. Speaking of self-serving rich people, let's also talk about charities. Why, fat man, are you saying charities are bad? No, I'm not saying that. Philanthropic charities are great. But yes, I'm saying they are bad. Charities are basically the same as private insurance. They exist because we weren't able to publicly fund a vital service of necessity. Think about it. Why do charities exist? Ignore all the immediate answers. To help the people, or to make things better, or to avoid paying taxes. Hang on. Why do you need charities to make things better? Why do you need charities to help people? Can't you just, do it? And you may correctly say, you can't just do it. Charities are there so we can pull money from everyone to solve more expensive problems. And while you are correct because of how beautiful, handsome, and smart you are, doesn't that still sound familiar to you? Because that's right, it's just insurance and taxes again. Charities only exist, like private insurance, because society failed to do something that they then have to step in for. The best charities are the ones that disappears because the things they are fighting for have been fixed. If a charity keeps existing, keeps doing the thing, then it's likely not a very good charity, or we're not fixing what needs to be fixed. Singapore's National Kidney Foundation, or NKF, is a charity that provides kidney dialysis for patients in need. They have 29 neighborhood dialysis centers in Singapore. Fantastic. The problem is they were founded 55 years ago. In half a century, we have not fixed the problems of not having enough dialysis centers, that we just sort of gave up and handed over the responsibility to a private organization. A private organization that, in a 2005 scandal over its lack of oversight and transparency, have at least squandered over $15 million in mismanagement and overpaid salaries, including that to their CEO, T.T. Durai, being paid $600,000 a year for non-profit work. Holy shit, I am in the wrong industry. And I'm not saying if we hand over the responsibility to our government, it is insusceptible to corruption. Because no shit, governments can be corrupt. But if we truly are a democratic republic, as we love to tout, we can vote in some stronger form of oversight. And you might ask, fat man, you can't expect us to pay for that. Our taxes will go up. To which I say, yes. That's how it's supposed to work, because we are already paying for NKF's operations either way. We pay through donations and premiums that patients still have to fork up for. Money for charities don't come from thin air, but instead of being funneled through a publicly regulated fund, going through a transparent private organization allows the rich to pull stunts like awarding multi-million dollars contracts to friends and letting just 10% of their funds be actually used on the problems they are supposed to fix. And do you remember when I said earlier that maybe charities exist to avoid paying taxes? You thought I was making a joke about that, didn't you? But even the idea that taxes is something we should dodge is the normalization of an idea that shouldn't be. Charity is something we should be doing in excess to what we have, not so that we can avoid to pay what our societal obligations ask of us. When we normalize the idea of tax dodging, tax incentives, or just lowering taxes to help lower and middle class or whatever, that's just a straight up myth. Taxes redistribute income and decrease wealth inequality, but only when it's used properly. For example, when you give a middle income earner in Singapore a 5% tax cut, they get to buy a PlayStation. But if you give 5% off the richest 1%, the millionaires and billionaires of this country, they get to buy you. They get to buy a person for a year. They can afford to buy a human. You and your measly PlayStation doesn't sound as cool now as owning a human for a year. Oh shit, I sound like a slave owner. Slavery is bad. Don't take this out of context. Conversely, if you raise income tax for the middle class by 5%, you lose $250, even though you're not really losing, you're reinvesting, but whatever. Let's be stupid and say you're losing money. Raise taxes for the richest 1% by 5%, and every person in the country gains $300, $50 more than what you put in. Poorer people get more money in public services by raising taxes equally across the board. So long as the government you have actually does its job. That's just how math works. And if they don't do their jobs, well, as long as you live in an actual democracy, that's what your votes are for. And remember, even if we do increase the taxes of these richest 1%, don't feel too bad, because they will still be millionaires. Our tendency to normalize everything we see but not what we can't doesn't just lead to the normalization of bad things. It can also make things that are fine, that are normal, seem terrible. Mental health, sexual activities, gender, poverty, homelessness are all things that are normal and that we should talk about. But because they aren't normalized in the same way as insurance and charities, we don't see them. But we're talking about systemic root problems of society, not John Cena. Just because he says we can't see him doesn't mean he's not there. We treat the pedestrian topic of mental health as taboo, but the societal failure of insurance as a success, to the point that an insurance agent is considered a sought-after job. Can you imagine us treating any other position that thrives on failure the same way? I'm not a drug dealer, I'm just an off-brand pharmacist. And how many other jobs that are detrimental to society have we normalized? Real estate agents, for example. Whenever one brags about making more sales, that's a person bragging about making housing, a fundamental human right, more expensive. When we use bad solutions because it works instead of trying to make things better, we suffer in the long term. Just because we can use rocks on nails doesn't mean we shouldn't upgrade to a hammer. Oh, it's John Cena. I get the joke now. I didn't get that for years. Thanks everyone for watching. The potato. Especially thanks to my lovely Patreon for their continued support. These past few months were rough between making the documentary and dealing with all the fallout from the Cult of Singapore video. Having these lovely people actually willing to give money for what I do really gave me the boost and willpower needed. For everyone who's new, who came in from my Cult of Singapore video, if you stayed all the way through, hi, I'm so sorry. This is probably not what you expected after such a high production value content like the previous video, but those documentaries take a long time to make, so I only do them like once a year or something. Most of the time you get monthly video essays like this. I hope it's still enjoyable. Also, 1,000 subscribers. Wow. I was making fun of it earlier in the video, but still wow. I feel like I should do something special, not just eat a potato. Maybe I'll do a Q&A. I don't think I have enough people in my comment section to do that, but you know, hey, feel free to ask me questions in the comments of any of my videos, and I'll gather all of them up in a pile, in a sack. That's a potato joke, and I'll do a Q&A once I have enough. It's a celebration of 1,000 subs. Patrons, again, ha, ha, ha. Patreon, Patreon. Patreon.com/Asian_. Let's just subscribe. I will see you next time. Bye.